Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm the CEO of ForemanLLC, LLC, where we provide consulting, business support, and professional development services. And Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit ForemanLLC.com. Hello, everyone. I am blessed to be with all of you here today. Thank you for joining me and Foreman Associates for our 40th episode of the Don't Call It Small Business Podcast. July 3rd will mark our 1-year anniversary, and I'm super excited. Oh, wow. Time sure does fly by, right? Well, let's dive into today's topic. Today's episode is going to address leadership, our character, values, and what defines us. And you'll ask and answer the question of what defines you? We talk about leaders and leadership, but do we truly know what leadership is and what it means to be a leader? Some would say that leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act toward achieving a common goal, or simply inspiring and motivating people to achieve a shared goal. If you look in a dictionary for the definition of leadership, it'll only confuse you. Why? Because they say things like the office or position of a leader, capacity to lead, the act or an instance of leading. Well, geez, now you have to go look up the words lead and leader. It's clear that the dictionary folks need to do some updating, and soon. We usually think of certain traits and characteristics when we hear the word leader. Courageous, brave, visionary, inspiring, blah, 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 blah. And we think of the men and women that we admire. We filter out the riffraff that we don't like or approve of, but the reality is the riffraff are still leading people. They just aren't leading you, right? And they just aren't what we define as good, great, or exceptional leaders. Their character, values, and beliefs simply challenge the list that we have in our minds. Brené Brown said, quote, "I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and who has the courage to develop that potential," end quote. That has nothing to do with title, rank, or position. It's just about the willingness to go above and beyond for someone and something other than self. Does that make sense? You don't have to have a special title to be a leader. You're just doing it. It comes from within. There's a quote from Rosalind Carter, the former First Lady of the United States and wife of former President Jimmy Carter. She's quoted as saying that a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. When we're trying to bring about change, people know the process is going to be rough, hard, and potentially grueling, so they resist it. Oh gosh, they fight it tooth and nail. But a great leader knows what's on the other side of that mountain, what's at the top of the valley, what's past the last tree in the forest. So the leader gives it everything they have to motivate the people to keep walking, keep marching, keep climbing, keep digging, keep pushing, keep working through the finish line, through the end, right? You know that the goal is there. You know that hope is through, all the twists and turns, and you just keep pushing and wanting for more, and you keep going for great, right? And you don't have to become a great or even a good leader overnight. It's not possible. It takes a few or a lot of rounds in life's boxing ring. And some people believe and follow for years and decades. And then some people are going to give up on you on day one. Some roll their eyes, suck their teeth. They don't even give you a chance. They just look at you like you are an absolute fool. And those who do follow, They do so because of the promise the mission offers and because of certain qualities and characteristics and traits that you possess. Let's be clear, some leaders are absolute jerks, but the people follow because the mission is inspiring. We have seen people that they actually don't even respect or admire the leader that they follow, but they are driven by the mission that leader has them focused and motivated on achieving. When you look at yourself, what do you think that other people think and say about you? Would they follow you? Do they follow you? I mean, beyond the social media following. I mean, I have social media followers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to actually follow me into, something that's going to require them to really change. It's one thing to have social media followers, but if you posted a call to action and asked those followers to meet you somewhere or do something with or for you, would they? Beyond the fun and exciting, would they? What would they sacrifice to help you reach a goal? Like, seriously, think about that. We follow people that we believe are going places. We trust them and continue to follow them when we believe that they can take us places. We oftentimes have some points of conflict that we wrangle with, especially with so many of us obsessing over branding and image. In light of the horror that has been highlighted of the police brutality and the vigilante antics throughout the U.S., I mean, oh my gosh, the most recent murder of George Floyd, that was the last straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I mean, we still have Breonna Taylor, whose life was snatched from her, and those officers have still yet to be arrested. It's been 3 months. We're crossing our fingers that all will go well with the case surrounding the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Like, it's so much to process and digest. We have back-to-back murders of Black people, and those are just the ones that were, that have been captured as far as brought to social media, brought to our attention. There's still plenty of people being murdered every day that we don't know about. And with all of this, America finally sparked, and it's blazed and it's blazing. And what we're seeing over the past 2 weeks are the decisions that business leaders, CEOs, founders, and executives are making to either speak out against the injustice that has been plaguing our nation for decades and decades, and the brutality that keeps plaguing us, right? They're either speaking out or they're remaining silent. And as consumers and investors, as we do a roll call and take note of the leadership decisions that corporations are taking, we're also paying close attention to what the leaders are doing separate from their companies, right? You have your brand that speaks for you, but what are you as the individual human being doing? A press release is cool. Thanks for checking the box. A tweet with hashtags. Yeah, that's cool. Marching and protesting is also cool. Your presence helps to visibly demonstrate the strength in numbers there. But what changes are you making individually, collectively, and through your organizations to use your power to bring positive change for equality and equity in the lives of Black people? I have an upcoming podcast where we're going to be dealing with all the isms, right, that plague society and business. Racism, sexism, classism, ageism, all these isms, right? And all the different phobias, all the fears that manifest and brew up that organizations have to deal with, have to figure out, have to structure themselves around, because you have your internal environment that is always impacted by your external environment. What we've seen over the past few weeks, as we've seen over, this happens all the time. It's not like it's just a new oopsie daisy. We see this, but some CEOs and executives have stuffed more than their foot in their mouths while posting to social media or being interviewed or being recorded somewhere. And they forget that they lead and operate a company that needs revenue to stay open. Here is a great example. Greg Glassman, CrossFit's founder and CEO, just stepped down and retired yesterday after his big mouth cost him their partnership with Reebok and Rogue Fitness. More than 1,000 gyms have pledged to stop using the CrossFit name. Some of the top CrossFit athletes are boycotting the CrossFit Games. It's estimated that it could possibly cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. Another casualty of a tweet, and another casualty of idiocy being recorded by technology. Yep, Glassman casually tweeted and said inflammatory remarks about the nationwide protests in support of Black Lives Matter. He showed his true colors during an almost 2-hour Zoom call with affiliates, saying that he nor anyone from his team was mourning George Floyd in his opinion. He said he wasn't, and he highly doubted that his team was. That he just spoke for his team. He doubted that people were actually mourning Floyd's death in general, like people that are protesting, people that are posting things on social media, right? He just doubted that they were actually mourning this man's death, his murder. And Glassman went on to say that he didn't approve of the rioting and burning of a city and a police department. He's talking about in Minneapolis, because of the death of a man who was, quote, likely going to be a co-conspirator in a counterfeiting ring, end quote. Yes, folks. Yeah. If you just cringed, imagine what the affiliates did. They were beyond ticked to hear Glassman rant and rave about his support of law enforcement, share an unfounded conspiracy theory about Floyd's death being premeditated, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. Yeah, Glassman stuck both feet and his whole butt in his mouth. Lord have mercy. CrossFit has their own crisis to manage, right? On top of the COVID crisis, on top of all the just life crises, this one's a biggie, and the pile keeps growing for CrossFit. This is not their first, run on this roller coaster ride. They've had some issues over the years dealing with race and sexism. So the truth is, let's just narrow this down. Greg Glassman didn't just become this way, right? This just didn't happen overnight. He's been this way for a very long time. It's just that only his inner circle and maybe 1 or 2 layers outside of that circle see, hear, and know the warp side of dear old Greg. He's done a good job of hiding in plain sight. His response to the protest just pulled back 1 layer of Greg and exposed him to the world. Trust and believe it gets darker the deeper you go. Now that he's retired from CrossFit, he will be free to speak his mind while probably still collecting a nice chunk of the company's profits. I mean, you know that they arranged a sweet package deal, no different than good old Papa John when he put foot in the mouth instead of a slice of pizza. Behind closed doors, lawyers and executives make concessions and create huge golden parachutes for them to float away with. Here are some things that we need to realize and address. Normally, how we conduct ourselves in public is not always how we behave in private. Our workplace mask is usually different than our at-home one. We rotate depending on the environment, but it should not be drastically different. I mean, I'm laid back and super casual at home, not overly concerned with my verb, noun, adjective usage. And the same is true when I'm around my family members and friends. I'm more conservative, on the other hand, and thoughtful in my speech and behavior when I'm around associates and acquaintances. And outside of that circle, I become very aware of my speech and behavior. I'm still me, but I'm more professional and reserved, right? I'm more conscientious of what I say and what I do. It's no different than our etiquette at home. It's more lax than in public. I mean, I don't mind. I don't even think twice about burping at home, but you won't hear me letting out a huge, Homer Simpson or burp or belch at a restaurant, event, museum, etc. You get my point? I may be bumping my music loud, driving the freeways and highways in some streets, but when I turn it in neighborhoods, business districts, and shopping centers, I'm mindful to turn my volume down to a respectful level. I mean, I'm always transparent with you guys. I use profanity at home and with friends, but no, you won't hear me cussing and carrying on in the workplace and in the general public. If you do happen to hear me cussing in public, that's because I'm cussing someone out for doing something so low down they needed the tongue lashing. And if you're shocked to hear that I use profanity, then you most definitely aren't close to me and you don't follow me on my spirituality blog where I pray for my potty mouth. So don't clutch your pearls. It won't do anything for you. What I'm trying to make clear is that I understand that my pajamas are for home, not work. And everything that I do and say with comfort and leisure at home needs to remain at home. The jokes I share with my inner circle, I don't share outside of it. Not all of the jokes that I've heard my favorite comedians say are appropriate to share at work or even through social media. Not all the memes that I see on social media are appropriate to share at work. Some aren't even appropriate for me to repost. I mean, one of my childhood friends shares some memes that leave me in tears from laughing so hard, but they are so inappropriate for the workplace. And they're so inappropriate for some of the followers that follow me. Some of them are so raw. I tell her that I can't even comment directly on the post. Yeah. I mean, she finds some zingers. They're hilarious. What I've learned in life is that there's boundaries all throughout life, and I try my best to respect them. There's layers to me. Not everyone gets to see all of my layers. That's reserved for family and my closest of closest friends. I'm still me. You're just seeing one or more layers of me, like a rosebud. But none of that has to do with my character. My character does not change by day, environment, or who I'm with. My character is me. No matter how you look at the rose, no matter the time, day, or weather, it's still a rose. H. Jackson Brown Jr. said that our character is what we do when we think no one is looking. And I would add, and listening and recording. Your character says a lot about you, and if you don't care whether or not someone is looking, listening, and recording, you just have a I don't give a crap attitude. You're on a fast track to destruction if you have an I don't give a crap attitude. I mean, look at Glassman. He didn't give a crap until he calculated how much it was going to impact his company's bottom line and that he was about to eat a load of crap. And guess what? Really, he still doesn't give a crap about other people that he was talking about and talking to. He just wants to stop the hemorrhaging. I just butchered that word. The hemorrhaging that he creates. We keep reading and hearing these pulseless apologies from people and companies who keep revealing their true character and values. They need it to be exposed so people can choose to continue investing in them or not. The Oxford Dictionary defines character as the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. It's our temperament, our disposition, mentality, and our makeup. I like my layers. It keeps me from being placed in a box. Even though people love boxes and I've had numerous people attempt to put me in a box, some still have me in a specific box. And I'm just like, why? I'm just not one box. I mean, when I was married, different people put me in different boxes according to the degree of separation. Some people then try to redefine me once I was divorced. Others try to keep me in their respective boxes. Those boxes are usually aligned with roles, titles, position, status, and other classifications, not necessarily factoring in personality, character, values, and belief systems. We have a difficult time letting people be themselves. That's why fans struggle so much with reality of the artist or the creative that they're a fan of. The actor, singer, rapper, dancer is not the character that they play. They have a performer self, a public self, a private self, and then a deep chamber private self, which is reserved for their innermost inner circle. And I say it that way because with so many associates and hangers-on, a lot of people think that they are part of a celebrity's inner circle when they're merely on a level that is not public or stage level. But they aren't the ones that the celebrity calls on to cry, that deep, serious, ugly cry. You know, that ugly one. Yeah, that one. They aren't the ones that the celebrity is most intimate with. So imagine the struggle fans have when their favorite celebrity doesn't match their persona, their stage personality, the character that they play. It reminds me of the movie I just saw that John Travolta plays the character inside of Fanatic. Like, he just can't align in that distinction between the two just drives him just in a rage. You have to see the movie. Anyway. Even on social media, people don't realize that you're getting a layer of them. Not all of them. Character. What you do and say when you don't know someone is recording you and posting the video on social media for the world to see. Character. What you do and say when you don't even factor in the consequences of your words and actions being shared through social media. Character. What you do and say behind someone's back. Character. What you do and say if you don't think that someone would ever find out. 2020 has been a doozy of a year, to say the least. We've seen people with leadership roles and titles demonstrate their unwillingness to be exceptional or even decent leaders. They know right from wrong, but they choose wrong because choosing right requires the courage to go against the grain, against the status quo. And some choose what's wrong because wrong for you is right for them. I mean, mass incarceration helps to finance a lot of greedy, unethical, and immoral people. It's wrong what they're doing, but for them, it's right. What COVID-19 has shown us is that people are disturbingly self-serving, self-centered, and selfish. We see business and government leaders more focused on profits than people. We see a lot of people more focused on the luxuries of consumerism, instant gratification, than on the health and safety of self and others. People are willing to risk getting sick just so they can have a haircut, manicure, or pay more for a glass of liquor at a bar. I just don't get it. Just buy the bottle of liquor. Drink it at home. You can sit in your yard with your friends. I don't know, but this just makes no sense. Last Friday, I couldn't find a store open to purchase some household supplies that I inadvertently ran out of, and yet the bars and restaurants that normally serve as the hookup spots were open past curfew. I shook my head in disbelief. There's a curfew to curb protests and rioting and so on and so forth, but people could go get sloppy drunk at various Atlanta hangouts. What in the world? This leads us to the concept of values. What do we value? What do you value? What do I value? What does your business value? What does your church value? Who do we value? Let's start by defining value. Oxford Dictionary provides us with two definitions in the form of a noun. The first being the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. The second definition is a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. As a verb, our values, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, are an estimate of the monetary worth of something. And another definition is to consider someone or something to be important or beneficial and have a high opinion of. As it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic, there are some people who don't see value in all of the lives living on this land. They are willing to see those lives lost as collateral damage. Some of these people you voted into office. Some of these businesses you invest in. Some of you shop from there every week or so. What if you're one of those numbers that they calculated as an acceptable casualty of COVID-19 or any other crisis for that matter? Character, values, leadership. In episode 39, I discussed business as a foundation in our lives, how every career has benefited from a basic understanding of business and business functions and principles. I also reinforced, as I've done in previous episodes, the fact that schools and religious institutions are also businesses. Even if given a nonprofit status, they are still businesses that need to generate revenue to pay overhead and other expenses. The impact that COVID-19 has had on houses of faith these past few months has created some controversy, as many pastors are restless and challenging state government's stay-at-home orders. It calls to question what the pastors value. What's the focus? I have an extreme example to share. And this is not an attack on pastors or churches or religion. It's just to highlight the flaws in leadership and examine the character and values of those in leadership. I totally understand that churches have bills that need paying. They have buildings sitting there empty for the most part. I mean, heck, the utility bills are way lower, so they don't have to worry much about that. Not that much. But they have salaries to pay, and there could be a mortgage on the church and other bills that are piling up. I get it. But why not ask your congregants for help while they watch your church service online? Why do you need to see them face to face in your church? There's a pastor whose name I won't mention because he doesn't need any more attention. He posted a video a while back saying, quote, if any of his church members, if any of his church members die from the virus, they'll have done so in the name of God and freedom. He said, quote, he thinks true Christians do not mind dying from COVID-19. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but if you don't, it's not hard to find him. Pastor. I'm not going to voluntarily die from COVID-19. I mean, this has to be an accident. This has to be a blindside kind of attack. This is not going to be that I'm going to walk into a situation. I'm just not. If my position doesn't make me a true Christian, then there you go. I'll just do what Jesus said to do when religious fools run amok. All right. What I decode from that message that the pastor is sharing is that he's fearful of his tithes and offerings being lower than what he's accustomed to. You don't need to see the butts and seats to reach the hearts and minds of your congregants. This pastor masquerades his values by actually stirring up rage and driving fear by pretending to try to extinguish it. He said, quote, that what they fear instead is living in fear, as he put it. People that can prefer tyranny over freedom do not deserve freedom. Well, Pastor, we also prefer truth and transparency over smoke and mirrors. We prefer common sense over smoke up our butts. Let's just keep it real. His statements makes clear what he values. He opened his church doors for Palm Sunday and some other times, and he stood his ground. And those in his congregation that showed up were doing so more for him, for pastor, than for self. They got the same message that they would have heard online, but I bet those wallets kept opening that day. They probably gave more that day than in a long time. It was like sticking it to the man. I mean, I can just hear the message now. Show the devil that you aren't scared of COVID-19. Dig deep in your pockets to prove the devil is a liar, and we won't lay down in silence hiding at home. No, no, no. We'll keep these church doors open $1 at a time. I have absolutely no clue if what was actually said. I didn't watch the church's broadcast that day. That's just what I imagined, because what was more important was butts in those pews, not to save lives and save souls, because the pastor already said that true Christians don't mind dying from COVID-19. That means that every person showing up to church that day or any other day knew that they were willingly risking their lives to prove that they're willing to die. They would do it because their pastor says so, just like the ones who handed over part or all of their government stimulus checks to their good old pastor. Beginning April 19th, he started a stimulus challenge asking Americans to donate their government stimulus checks to evangelist missionaries and music ministers who he said, they're not receiving offerings in more than a month at that time. And by May 1st, more than 205 people had already given chunks of their checks. Now, I can do the calculations. If those 205 people gave a minimum of 10% tithe of a $1,200 check, that's $24,600 that went to the church. So when CNN's Victor Blackwell asked the pastor why he was asking vulnerable people to hand over their $1,200 stimulus checks, he said it was because some evangelists and missionaries don't receive stimulus money. Leadership, character, values. That makes me also wonder something else. I'm just going to throw it out there. I mean, the churches in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to be exact, the racial makeup is more than 54% Black, 39% white, 3.5% Asian, 3.5% Latino or Hispanic, 0.4 is about 0.5% Native American, and about 1.3%, list themselves as being two or more races. If you take those numbers, those are from the 2010 census. You take those into consideration, and there's a reasonable guesstimate that the numbers have probably ticked upwards over the past 10 years. It's safe to say that it's still predominantly Black city. Baton Rouge, if you don't know, is the capital of Louisiana. It's the second largest city in Louisiana, second to New Orleans. I wonder if the pastor is going to be leading a charge in Baton Rouge to speak up and protest against racial inequality, police brutality, and racism. I mean, he has his members of his congregation that are Black. He told his congregation to risk their lives for COVID-19 to come to church to praise and worship. I'm hoping that he wouldn't deny that his Black congregants' lives matter. Are they valuable enough to march beside, kneel beside, and protest of the evil that plagues this nation? Will the church walk the streets of Baton Rouge, once again risking COVID-19 exposure to stand in unison with the other voices who demand change in this country? I mean, just something to think about. I mean, I looked online, hadn't seen anything. I just see him suing the governor of the state and all this other stuff for, just wanting to open up his doors. Just something to think about. I mean, if it's not about tithes and offerings, I'll just leave that there. Leadership, character, and values. I've shared and given examples of leadership, character, and values. All of these are built they're built on our beliefs. What we believe is what we focus our attention on. What we believe in is what we build upon, and it becomes our values. And through those values, our character is revealed, and we demonstrate our leadership. Oftentimes, those values are fully articulated in the business space. We talk about mission, vision, goals, and objectives, but you don't see and hear most companies speaking about training on and being rooted in their values. So the team doesn't know why the train moves on the track other than to reach a destination. In the book Dare to Lead, Brene Brown writes, one reason we roll our eyes when people start talking about values is that everyone talks a big values game, but very few people actually practice one. It can be infuriating, and it's not just individuals who fall short of the talk. In our experience, only about 10% of organizations have operationalized their values into teachable and observable behaviors that are used to train their employees and hold people accountable. 10%. if you're not going to take the time to translate values from ideals to behaviors, if you're not going to teach people the skills they need to show up in a way that's aligned with those values, and then create a culture in which you hold one another accountable for staying aligned with those values, it's better not to profess any values at all. She continues by saying, they become a joke, a cat poster, total BS. I totally agree, Brene. Ladies and gentlemen, your company has to operationalize its values. How do you do business? What do your actions say about you? We can stand boldly and say to business leaders, what position will you take as it relates to Black Lives Matter? Or, what position will you take as it relates to sexism and misogyny? Or, what position will you take about age discrimination? Those are in-your-face, hot-seated questions that you can make or break a leader, a business, etc., right? You can say, what will you do, as it deals with veterans, whatever. But let me pose some other scenarios where people may stutter through a response and other people will still give them a pass for it because the offense doesn't seem as bad as one of the isms that I just mentioned. You run a company and you have a conflict of interest, but say and do nothing. You're part of a project and your participation was made possible because of someone else's efforts, yet you don't acknowledge them. You don't include them in the project. You nickel and dime a firm to do work for you for a fraction of what you know you would pay other firms. They already deeply discounted their rate for you, but you tell them that you can't afford what they initially quoted you. Then you take the money that you would have given them, that you were able to save by nickel and diming them, and you take a cruise with your family and buy luxury gifts for your spouse. Or what about this one? You're trying to form a partnership with another company while using the ideas of someone else. You haven't given credit to that other person. You haven't included them in the deal. You haven't told the other party and parties that the missing link is this other person. You know that you will potentially benefit greatly from this deal, and they won't. You don't want to split that pie to include one more slice. Instead, you're focused on how all or part of that particular slice could be yours. I have one. Oh, here's another one. You have a business, and to entice customers to return, you announce that your location is regularly sanitized every hour. What your customers don't know is that you water down the sanitizing solution to save money. The bottles are 3 parts water, 1 part disinfectant, definitely below the minimum threshold required to clean and sanitize the surfaces at your location. Here's another example. You contract with someone to do work for your company. You're supposed to pay them a fee or commission for the completed work. They're about to undergo treatment in a hospital and they ask you to give the money to their spouse, but instead you don't. Their spouse calls you, but you avoid their calls. When the worker begins to recover and contact you, you avoid their calls. When they get out of the hospital, you avoid them. Someone pitches an idea that you know for a fact is someone else's idea, but you say nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. You take credit for someone else's work. You cut someone out of a deal, a project, after they did the hard work that you couldn't do. You then kept their share of the profits. You apply for government relief for your business and use the money for your personal bills and needs. You pull down your competition street signs, banners, and other marketing materials. You post and have others post fake Yelp and Google reviews to boost your company's profile. You post and have others post fake Yelp and Google reviews to destroy your competition's brand and lure potential customers your way. You host an event and lie about how many people were actually in attendance. You pay for social media followers to have a bigger online presence and bragging rights. Some of these examples that I just shared, you probably didn't even think twice about, didn't flinch once. They didn't seem like real issues of concern in your opinion. It doesn't make you bad or evil. It just means that certain unethical practices are lesser offenses or not offenses at all in your opinion. What we have to stop and ask ourselves is how our beliefs help to shape what we value, and then outline what we truly value and how that defines us as leaders, managers, and so on and so forth. If you find yourself constantly in the valley of your business life, it's a possibility that your character and values are playing a major role in that valley experience. You can call it karma. You can call it whatever you like. The truth is, what you invest in the world, you always get back as a return. Whether we like the return or not, it's there. Whether we like the return or not motivates us to either continue reinvesting the same way or changing. If the floor keeps falling from under you, consider if you've been pulling the rug from under someone else. If it feels like you're being sabotaged, examine all the ways that you could be the saboteur in your other relationships and dealings, past and present. If you feel that someone is withholding information or resources from you, look back and look around you at the instances where you withheld from others. While you're being dishonest, don't be upset at someone else's dishonesty with you. It's not always a cause and effect, but it's not always not. Sometimes we unknowingly put monkey wrenches in our plans out of fear, pride, ego, and greed. Even the people who we think have it all, when you pull back the layers and peek inside, you realize how jacked up their lives truly are. Some people's jacked up lives are revealed by tabloids, social media, and sources like TMZ. You've been idolizing an image or a small fraction of a person's identity. A person proclaims they would never steal, yet they steal from their investors and line their pockets with 6, 7, and 8 figures. Maybe someone needs to ask that person if they know the definition of stealing and theft. I don't know. Misusing public funds for personal gain. We see this happen more times than we want to admit. How many politicians have been caught with their hands in the cookie jar? Too many. And it's still happening. Some are just more slick than others, but they will rationalize in their minds that they aren't a thief. It all boils down to belief, values, character, and leadership. How we live our lives, how we speak to and about others, how we treat others. It defines us. Well, folks, it's that time again. Time to wrap up and go our separate ways until next week. If you have questions or suggestions about this show, please email them to us at don'tcallitsmallbiz@gmail.com. I have a quote that I want to leave you with from Henry Kravis. He said, if you don't have integrity, you have nothing. You can't buy it. You can have all of the money in the world, but if you are not a moral and ethical person, you really have nothing. And that's that. Yes, indeed. With that, be sure to check us out on Facebook at Foreman & Associates and on Instagram and Twitter at ForemanLLC. Our podcast Twitter handle is It Ain't Small. Be sure to also follow us and share us with your friends, colleagues, and family. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Reach out to me, say hello, share your story. I look forward to meeting you. I want to make sure I give proper credit for our show theme song. It's called Higher Up. It's by Shane Ivers. Thank you for tuning in to the Don't Call It Small Business Podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. And don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you here for episode 41 this Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a super awesome day and week. I love you all.